Hi everyone, Slap-the-knee hands Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the brand new Death Grips album, Year of the Snitch. Death Grips are a Sacramento-based experimental hip-hop trio consisting of drummer Zach Hill, producer Flatlander, also frontman, lyricist extraordinaire Ride. As a trio, they exploded onto the internet-based music scene much earlier this decade through releases like their ex-military mixtape and The Money Store. Ever since their musical breakthrough, their sound has remained one of the most polarizing things in modern music today. And for good reason. The group's clash of hip-hop, industrial music, noise, glitch, pop, and electronic music is not a fusion for everyone. And I think Death Grips' sound has only managed to get more and more difficult as the years have drawn on, like on the animalistic and unruly No Love Deep Web, or the incredibly abstract Government Plates, or the 1-2 punch of the double album The Powers That Be, the first half of which features all these really super prominent Bjork vocal samples littered all over the record, and then following that up with Jenny Death, which is a roaring guitar riff heavy record. Bottomless Pit pretty much played as a somewhat catchy update on a lot of the sounds the band had forged up until that point. Nothing all that exciting and new, but still an incredibly well produced and catchy album. But immediately after this release, Death Grips went left field once again with their Steroids Megamix, incorporating elements of cyberpunk and gabber music in their already eclectic and chaotic repertoire. Not to mention that this Megamix or EP is just this continuous 22-minute long musical experience. Now, as far as my expectations for Year of the Snitch went, I kind of hoped that Death Grips would continue down this experimental road, continue to try new things. Especially since it seemed like they were kind of painting themselves into an artistic corner with Bottomless Pit, as good as it was. Because to me, that album and Jenny Death kind of feels like the closing of a chapter in the band's career, and I was sort of hoping that Steroids was a bit of a prelude to what they might be doing going forward. However, I was kind of lukewarm on some of the teaser tracks to this album going into it, so I didn't really know what to expect out of this album, which is partially worrying but simultaneously exciting. I like the fact that I've been listening to Death Grips for almost a decade now, and I can pretty much expect for them to surprise me with every new release. It's great that a band almost 10 years on is still pretty much pushing the envelope. And they pretty much do that on Year of the Snitch, while departing pretty boldly away from the industrial hip-hop sound that they're known for. Now, it's not completely gone. I mean, I think the core elements of the band's sound still very much remain on this album. But Death Grips are incorporating way more elements of psychedelic rock and krautrock, electronic music, experimental and progressive rock, even a little bit of jazz too. On top of that, it feels like Death Grips are starting to incorporate some of the out-there compositional ideas that you might find if you went back and listened to some of Zach Hill's solo stuff on albums like Astrological Straits, which felt like they were having more presence in the band's sound on that Steroids Megamix too. Also those ILY's records that Zach Hill and Flatlander have been releasing on the side. So again, while Year of the Snitch does feel like a stylistic and a genre change for the band, you're still getting Zach Hill's insane drumming, Flatlander's abrasive, futuristic, and very dark production, Ride's intense and absolutely insane vocal performances, and his cryptic lyricism. But now all of these elements are being fed into very different musical styles and with incredibly kooky instrumentation. Weird synthesizers and effects and delays and samples, turntable scratching, quite a bit of that. There are also multiple instances on this album in which Death Grips are sampling their older material too. Generally, I would say the songs aren't quite as dark and edgy as a lot of Death Grips' past material, like on records such as No Love Deep Web. Instead, in the 37 minutes that this record lasts, Year of the Snitch comes off way more absurdist and abstract and completely weird. Also, there are lots of seemingly random transitional moments from one track to the next, or short interstitial tracks that actually add quite a bit of flow and personality to the record. Honestly, the whole thing is a really wild ride right from the start. Kicking things off with Death Grips is Online, which is what a 90s rave must have sounded like if you were on enough drugs to kill a horse. With all these entrancing, delayed synth leads, very persistent, bustling, driving beat, and these enveloping, washy synth chords that kind of feel like when they pop in, I'm whizzing down a concrete tunnel at 1,000 miles an hour. Also, rides shrieks throughout the track, the booming bass, the turntable scratches all add a lot of very quirky and freaky flavor to the mix. The track is trippy, it's overwhelming, it's infinitely groovy. The track Flies has grown on me quite a bit since the release of the album. Originally, I found it kind of underwhelming, but in the context of the record, it feels like a perfect counterpoint to DG is Online. Also, the kind of sour and warped synth arpeggios make much more sense in the context of the electronic dance music influences that much of this album is immersed in. Also, the super disturbing lyrics on this cut about flies vomiting, obviously, to digest their food. The lyrics on the hook, I think, are a little open to refrain, but the way that I'm reading them, it's like flies are vomiting up Ride as if he is the disgusting enzymes that come out of them. Is he filth? Is this song filth? Is he death? I don't know. Either way on this track, I feel like the band is really kind of embodying the dark underbelly of the internet and also kind of enhancing the narrative of tracks like Trash from Bottomless Pit, for example, as well as Shit Show later on the album. There is a very eerie and droning transition out of Flies that brings us into Black Paint, which is quickly becoming one of my favorite Death Grip songs, period. It's a jammy, twisted piece of experimental arena rock. At points, it kind of reminds me of some of the more guitar-centric tracks on Jenny Death, but even better this time around. I love the lyrics about darkness being shrouded in it. It almost feels like an update on the Rolling Stones' Paint It Black, but for the millennial industrial hip-hop generation. The song features these amazing, dense, heavy, tension-building verses that eventually explode into these like riotous riffs that feature on top of them Ride chanting, "Hey! Hey!" It sounds like something out of an AC/DC song. There's an awesome instrumental bridge on the cut, a kind of jammy, trippy, freaky synth solo at the very end. The song Linda's in Custody is a very quiet and unsettling cool-down point with these quirky synth leads on the hook. A super busy and synthetic beat that kind of reminds me of past Death Grips releases like No Love Deep Web or Government Plates. And Ride rapping in a very quiet fashion with his vocals kind of overpowering the beat anyway, right up in your face, super claustrophobic. People around the internet have been talking about the Linda being mentioned in this song, in fact being Linda Kasabian, further cementing the series of nods throughout the Death Grips discography to Charles Manson and the Manson family. And while this cut is not one of the harder or more aggressive in the track listing here, it does still have lots of detail to offer, plenty of strange effects whizzing by, and really impressive musicianship and production techniques all around. We get kind of a fun transitional moment with horn section which features these keyboard passages and drums that just do not let up. They're so mind-blowingly intense for the minute and change that this track lasts. We get a breather post that with the song HAHAHA, another supremely weird teaser track that now makes a lot more sense in the context of the album. And despite the psychedelic and kind of silly additions to Death Grip's sound on this cut, believe it or not, this is actually one of the more familiar sounding moments on the record, meaning this feels more in Death Grip's industrial hip-hop wheelhouse, that and the song Streaky too, whose absurd keyboards and vocal effects stand out so much more in the context of Snitch. Also, I think I can unequivocally say that these two tracks are maybe two of Death Grip's most fun songs. Meanwhile, the utterly chaotic Shit Show kind of serves as like a modus operandi for the record. It's kind of like the band trying to sound as noisy and abrasive and chaotic as possible in a very short span of time, and definitely succeeding in the process. Again, to me this cut is very much like the trash of the album. Oh, we make trash, trash begets trash, we upload trash, we're overwhelming the internet, we're overloading the internet. Over here, it's a shit show, we're just literally making a shit show. Watch it, gawk it, freak out at it. The song Dilemma is a super jammy, linear, and kraut Rockian piece, a song that generally sees Death Grip sounding more like a live and a full band as opposed to a group of people just kind of assembling a piece of music in a very, I guess, sanitary fashion in a digital audio workstation. Between the grooves, Ride's performance, also the interesting synth leads on here, the riffs, it's all very thrilling and futuristic sounding. The Fear also sounds very much like just a live band performing, but now instead of a kind of linear krautrock thing, it almost feels like a fusion of jazz rock and progressive rock with these super sinister keyboards. Never thought I would ever hear Death Grips put together something that sounds like this, yet here we are, and it's fantastic. I love the lyrics on this track too that seem to call out to, again, literally fear, mental instability, phobias. Also, Ride's freakish shouts on the chorus are amazing. This is the first time in a while, like maybe since No Love Deep Web, where I felt like the band's music sounded genuinely frightening. The outro cut is kind of short and abrasive and lo-fi and strange, and then that kind of guides us into Disappointed, a predictive track the band was releasing, maybe in anticipation that fans wouldn't really take to this new sound of theirs. So kind of beat them to not liking the record, call fans out on not being able to handle it, and while yes, I understand that there has been some criticism and some kickback against this record, I myself was not super crazy about the singles going into it, but generally the response amongst fans for this album, from what I've seen, is pretty positive. I do love the track. I think the instrumental is fantastic. I love Ride's shrieks of, "Why me?" I love how sarcastic and mocking the song is generally. I would never deprive Death Grips of the opportunity to break their fans' balls or basically get at their critics. They've done it numerous times before, but maybe in this instance they've sort of put the cart before the horse just a little bit. Because Year of the Snitch is a pretty fantastic record. Death Grips fans have been riding with them for pretty long up until this point and have sat through some pretty incredible and strange releases to get to Year of the Snitch. Fans generally enjoy steroids, fans generally enjoy government plates, and fans generally enjoy the first half of the powers that be. And I definitely see Year of the Snitch as being in league with those albums on the weirder side of the spectrum in the Death Grips discography. In fact, I think it may be my favorite of the weirder albums that they've released so far. With, of course, releases like Bottomless Pit and The Money Store and Ex-Military being so much more accessible by comparison. But overall, again, I think this is a great listen. I think it's a great new sound for Death Grips. I think it's super exciting and, again, I'll use the word overwhelming, mind-bending, utterly strange, completely dynamic, super versatile. Lots of sonic layers to this album, too. I wouldn't say it's as high fidelity as Bottomless Pit, but there are still a lot of sonic details on this album that I uncover with every listen. Whether it be weird rhythmic nuances in Zach Hill's drumming or another strange, super esoteric sample placed hidden somewhere in the track. The performances across this record generally are pretty exhilarating. I love the absurd attitude and nature of this record too. In a way, this album comes off as Death Grips not really taking themselves all too seriously. And that's not to say that they didn't put effort into the album or something like that. It just feels like they're letting go a little bit of the super dark, edgy, and tortured aesthetics that got them to where they are today, and are instead embracing a sound that is much more fringe and out of control. I'm feeling a light to decent 9 on this album. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like, please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Death Grips, forever.